Hell and its punishments in different religions. In world religions, the concept of hell has been conceived to deter people from committing misdeeds that harm people and society. Severe punishments have been mentioned for them in the afterlife. Those who pass their lives in peace and with good deeds in this world are rewarded in the afterlife with heaven, where every sort of happiness and life forever are at their disposal. In several early religions, the concept of hell was not formulated. The deceased just ceased to exist after his physical death. Slowly and gradually, the idea of hell was developed, and it reached the zenith in Islam, which portrays punishments with such graphics that people shudder in fear. This video is only an introduction to hell, as it has been presented in various world religions since antiquity. We have only mentioned the broad contours of hell so the viewers can get an idea of how hell has remained an important component in the narratives of various religions. Before we start, we make a humble submission that we have been presenting entertaining and interesting videos on this channel. We need your support. We request that you subscribe to our channel, like it, press the bell icon, leave a comment, and share it with your friends if you like the video. Do it. Hell in the ancient Egyptian religion. When people think of the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids are the first thing that comes to their mind, which are basically the graves of pharaohs and other Egyptian notables. The buildings of everyday Egyptian life made from reeds, wood, and mud bricks have long since perished, but the stone pyramid tombs of the pharaohs and other nobles have resisted the onslaught of time. Mummified corpses and their preservation were considered essential for a contented afterlife. The most commonly recovered types of artifacts from the pyramids were doll-like Ushabti figurines. These were inscribed with the text of the 6th chapter of the Book of the Dead, which was a funerary text of magic spells compiled by numerous Egyptian priests across 1,000 years, to assist the deceased's journey through the Egyptian underworld called the Duat, so the deceased person was to reach the blissful kingdom of Osiris and the heavenly Aru. It was called the Fields of Rushes, the reward for terrestrially well-behaved souls. After death, the deceased had to successfully cross various parts of the Duat by tackling various demons and challenges. There were various gates, doors, and pylons located in the Duat, which the deceased was required to pass. These gates were guarded by in-charge deities, commonly depicted as being zoanthropomorphic and adorned with enormous threatening knives, who allowed access only to the souls capable of pronouncing their secret names as a sort of password. Therefore, in ancient Egypt, the deceased were buried with writings containing the names of these deities. A majority of these deities were given names that inspired terror and, above all, evoked their fearful powers. The names of these deities were very strange and disturbing. For instance, one name was He Who Dances in Blood, the second name was Mistress of Anger, and another name was as harmless as Mistress of the Altar. The Duat contained frightening lakes of fire, walls of iron, trees of turquoise, underworld baboons, ravenous hellswines, crocodiles, serpents, wild dogs, fire-breathing dragons, frightful monsters, and cruel and murderous creatures with the heads of animals also roamed the dark plains of the Duat. Besides, pits of fire, abysses of darkness, deadly knives, rivers of boiling water, and fetid exhalations had also presence in this part of the Duat. The deceased had to negotiate hostile terrain and spiritual booby traps. Once the dead cleared this part, he reached the Grand Hall of Ma'at for the weighing of the heart, a judgment performed by the dog-headed god Anubis, under the watchful gaze of Osiris, king of the underworld. This ritual was called the Judgment of the Dead. In this ritual, the deceased's first task was to correctly address each of the 42 assessors of Ma'at by name, as well as the itinerary of halls that one had passed through. The 42 assessors of Ma'at were minor ancient Egyptian deities of the Ma'at goddess charged with judging the souls of the dead in the afterlife by joining the judgment of Osiris in the weighing of the heart. Then, the deceased was required to confirm that he had not committed any of the possible 42 crimes that would bar his entry into Egyptian heaven. Some crimes were disobedience to the gods, murder, violence against orphans, stealing of cattle, etc. After confirming that the deceased was sinless, the heart of the deceased was weighed by Anubis against the feather of Ma'at. Anubis was an ancient Egyptian god of the dead, represented as a jackal or a man with the head of a jackal. Ma'at was the Egyptian goddess of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. Any heart that was heavier than a feather failed the test, and the deceased was rejected and eaten immediately by Ammit, the devourer of souls. Ammit was also an Egyptian goddess, with the forequarters of a lion, the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, and the head of a crocodile. In this way, these people were denied existence after death in the Duat. Despite the presence of many demon-like inhabitants in the Duat, it was not equivalent to hell in the Abrahamic religions, in which souls are condemned with fiery torments. The absolute punishment for the wicked in ancient Egyptian Duat was only the denial of an afterlife to the deceased, and he only ceased to exist. There were no physical punishments for the sinner in the Duat. The souls that were lighter than the feather were considered to have passed this most important test, and were allowed to travel towards the field of rushes, called Sekitaru. In the old Egyptian language, an ideal version of the world, in which they could plow, sow, and harvest abundant crops and live forever with happiness. The Qxir netherworld, the hell of ancient Mesopotamia. Ancient Mesopotamia was divided into the lands of the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians. Here, people were born to die. Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom and magic, declared that death awaited a person once he was born. The Epic of Gilgamesh ultimately persuades its reader that the quest for immortality was pointless, and instead, one should live on in the memories of others with their fame or accomplishments on earth. The immortal life belongs to the gods only. Unlike the abundance of Egyptian funerary texts, no such afterlife instruction manuals from the ancient Mesopotamians have been discovered. There was no hell in its tradition, meaning that the deceased were not tortured for their sins in the afterlife. The heavens were home to the gods only. The dead traveled instead to a dark, colorless netherworld known by many names. In Sumerian, it was called Qxir, Kala, Kuku, Arali, or Kaigal. In Akkadian, it was called Ursitu. Metaphysically, Qxir was far away. Physically, it was thought to lie in a cavern a short distance below the world's surface. It was referred to as the land of no return, and the house which none leaves who enters. And it was imagined as a giant house of dust. Dust covered its doors, walls, buildings, and bolts, and dust was the only food and drink available to the dead. Above ground, grieving families would traditionally pour out liquids onto the dirt for their deceased to enjoy. According to this belief, it was considered essential to have as many offspring as possible so that one's descendants could continue to provide libations for the dead person to drink for many years. Those who had died without descendants suffered the most in the Qxir netherworld, because they had nothing to drink at all, and people believed they could exact revenge by haunting the living. In the later years, from 2112 to 2004 BC, it was believed that a person's treatment in the afterlife depended on how they were buried. Those deceased who had been given sumptuous burials were treated well in the netherworld, but those who had been given poor burials would suffer in the netherworld. Those who did not receive a proper burial, such as those who had died in fires and whose bodies had been burned, or those who died alone in the desert, were deprived of any existence in the netherworld at all, and they simply ceased to exist. In the core netherworld, there was no concept of the final judgment of the deceased. The dead were neither punished nor rewarded for their deeds in life. The ruler of the netherworld was the goddess Ereshkigal, who lived in the palace of Ganzer. The underworld had 7 gates, which were guarded by a gatekeeper, whose name was Neti. Once someone entered the netherworld, a return to the living was impossible. The underworld was neither a place of joy nor abject misery, merely a dried and dulled version of life above ground. Technically, it was not a hell, as we understand the word, but an antipode to the vibrant high heavens. The netherworld was also the abode of various demons, including the hideous child devourer called Lamashtu, the fearsome wind demon god Pazuzu, and Gala, who dragged mortals to the netherworld. House of Lies, or Dozak, the hell of Zoroastrianism. In Zoroastrian beliefs, 3 days after death, the soul makes its way towards the entrance of the bridge, in the guiding company of both benevolent gods and a gang of threatening demons, until the raucous party meets in a waiting tribunal presided over by the judicial figure called Mitra, the Zoroastrian angelic divinity of covenant, light and oath, protector of truth and guardian of cattle. The good and evil deeds of the soul are weighed up on a spiritual balance. If the deceased is judged to be wicked, his conscience, called Den, appears in the form of a witch, who takes the soul on a disgusting crossing of the Chinvat Bridge, similar to entering a charnel house. The Chinvat Bridge, or the Bridge of the Separator, is a nexus between this world and the next that all departing souls must cross. Its earthly bridgehead lies at the summit of the mythical mountain harbors, while its end in the south leads to Zoroastrianism's paradise called the House of Song. The Chivnat Bridge's vast body is suspended directly above hell, high and fearful. When a sinner wants to cross it, the bridge contracts to the width and sharpness of a razor blade, from which the unrighteous dead called Druid tumbles, dragged down by demons into the House of Lies, which is a place of torment and suffering. Hell, in Zoroastrianism, is described as a deep and dark well, stinking, and extremely narrow in shape. The smallest of the harmful creatures called Zrafstars are as big as mountains, and all devour and destroy the souls of the damned. The most horrible punishment and torture are given to sinners. The severest punishment is for sexual crimes, but there are also other actions disapproved of by Zoroastrianism. It is a horrible place, noxious fumes choke the air, the darkness is overwhelming, which is said to be so thick that it can be held in one's hand, and the odors are so powerful that they can be cut with a knife. Poisonous foods are all that can be found, and even though souls are crammed together in wailing conditions, they are still filled with the chill of abject loneliness. The condemnation to this hell is not, however, an eternal sentence. It is more forgiving and temporary, and it is intended to be more reformative. It is a place where souls can work to atone for their sins. The sinner will stay in the House of Lies or Dozak for a specified time. In some cases, it will take 12,000 to 60,000 years to atone for his misdeeds. After the prescribed period, the soul will be judged again. If it is judged to be pure, it will be allowed to cross the Chinvat Bridge and enter Zoroastrian paradise. The cycle will repeat until the soul gets released from hell and is sent to the House of Songs. Narak, or Narak, hell in Hinduism. Narak, or Narak, also called Yamlok, is hell in Hinduism, where sinners are tormented after death. It is also the abode of Yam, the god of death. The meaning of Yamlok is the place of the Yam god. Narak, as a whole, is also known by various other names like Yamlaya, Yamalok, Yamadan, and Yamlokia, conveying that it is the realm of the Yam god. The number and names of hells, as well as the types of sinners sent to a particular hell, vary in different texts of Hinduism. However, many scriptures describe 28 hells in total. After death, messengers of the Yam god called Yamadutas bring the souls of the deceased to the court of Yam, where he weighs the virtues and vices of the deceased and passes judgment, sending the virtuous to Svarg and the sinners to one of the hells. The stay in Svarg or Narak is generally described as temporary. After the quantum of punishment is over, the souls are reborn to improve their deeds in the physical world and achieve Svarg after their death. Hinduism's religious book, the Bhagavata Purana, describes the location of Narak as beneath the earth, between the 7 realms of the underworld called Patala and the Garbhodaka Ocean, which is the bottom of the universe. It is located in the south of the universe and beneath the earth. The Narak is simply a dark, bottomless pit and an evil place. It has a dense jungle without any shade, where there is no water and no rest. The Yamadutas torment souls without any break on the orders of their master. There are various levels of hell reserved for different categories of sinners in Hinduism. A few are described. A Misra hell, meaning darkness, is intended for a person who grabs another's wealth, wife, or children. And Hata Misra hell means blind darkness. Here, those sinners are placed who deceive another man and enjoy his wife or children. Raurava hell, or fearful hell, is the place assigned to a person who cares about his own and his family's good only but harms other living beings and is always envious of others. Kumhipaka, or cooked in a pot, is for those who cook beasts and birds alive. In Narak, sinner is cooked alive in boiling oil by Yamadutas. These are only a few names to mention. In hell, sinners are beaten, tormented, cooked in pots, kept extremely hungry and thirsty, crushed like sugar cane, mauled by birds, mammals, reptiles, mosquitoes, worms, etc., and given various other terrible punishments. The Hindu religion regards hell not as a place of permanent living for sinners but as an alternate domain from which an individual can return to the present world after receiving appropriate punishments for his worldly misdeeds. Then again, he is sent to the world with a lower status due to his past deeds, and he is required to improve his deeds and earn a higher status once he dies. Narak or Naraka. Buddhist hell. In Buddhism, hell is also called Narak or Narak. In the early stage of Buddhism, the concept of hell was only found in oral traditions. Later, the idea of hell was written in the Pali Canon around 100 BC, in present-day Sri Lanka. Siddhartha, also called Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, rejected the reliance upon deities to encourage individuals to take responsibility for their own deeds. Many details of Buddhist hell come from the sutras, the texts that form the core of the canonical literature of Buddhism, as they are considered to be, in part, documentation of the Buddha's oral sermons. In the Mahavasta text, meaning the Great Story, compiled sometime between the 2nd century BC and the 4th century AD, hell is described as being composed of 8 great cold hells and 8 hot hells. Each great hell has another 8 hells, or 128 hells in total. The names of the 8 great cold hells are Arbuda or blister cold, Nirabuddha or burst blister cold, Adata or shivering cold, Hahahava or lamentation, Huhava or chattering teeth cold, Uptala or blue lotus, Padma or lotus, and Mahapadma or great lotus. The residents of these hells are tormented by the intense cold. Here are placed those sinners who commit spiritual or emotional crimes. In the first hell, the intense cold produces chilblains all over one's body. In the second hell, one's chilblains worsen and finally burst. The following 3 hells are named for the shrieks of sufferers who inhabit them. In the sixth hell, one's flesh turns blue from the intense cold. In the last 2 hells, the cold makes one's flesh crack open, resembling a crimson lotus. The residents of 8 hot hells are tormented by intense heat. Here are placed those sinners who commit physical crimes in the world. The first hot hell is called Sanjava, and it is for those sinners who commit acts of violence and murder with the intent of killing living beings out of a desire to destroy their source of life. The second hell is called Kalasutra, and it is for those sinners who steal from the sick or take objects that they are not worthy of using. The third hell is Samgata, and it is for the people who stay ignorant in life and possess an egocentric life. The fourth hell is named Rorava, and it is for those sinners who use intoxicants. Maharorava hell is an abode for liars or vocal crimes. Tapana hell is for those who reject the laws of karma and the existence of good and evil. Paritapana hell is for those who sexually defile religion, like seducing monks, nuns, and virtuous laywomen. Avicii hell is for those people who commit one of the 5 sins of Buddhism, which include the murder of one's biological mother or father, the evil intention of causing harm to the Buddha or the Buddhist community, and the murder of scholars. These hells are like fortresses. The flames pour from the walls, floor, and ceiling. There are exit doors in each wall that are open, only to slam shut as soon as the sinner goes near them. When a person eventually makes it through the eastern door, he will find himself in the hell of excrement. Here, the sinner is devoured by creatures. A few flee to the hell of hot embers and then to the forest of sword-blade trees, where extremities are severed, before tumbling into the river of caustic water. When a sinner crawls to shore, hell officials pour liquid copper and hot metal balls down the sinner's throat. The sinner cannot die or leave tormented hell to be reborn again until he receives an appropriate quantum of punishments for his sins committed in the world. Narak, hell of Jainism. Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism religions are mostly based in India. Though their hells have different characteristics but all bear the same name Narak or Narak. Hell in Jainism is characterized by great suffering. Narak is usually translated into English as hell or purgatory. It differs from the hells of Abrahamic religions, as souls are not sent to Narak as the result of a divine judgment. Furthermore, the length of a sinner's stay in a Narak is not eternal, though it is usually very long, measured in billions of years. A soul is reborn into a Narak as a direct result of his or her previous karma, actions of body, speech, and mind. He resides there for a finite length of time until his or her karma has achieved its full result. After his karma is used up, he may be reborn in one of the higher worlds as the result of an earlier karma that had not yet ripened. Hell is situated on the 7 lower grounds, called at Holak, of the universe, while the human world is on the mid-level called Madhyalok, and the heavenly realms exist above, called Urdhvalok. The first level is called Ratnaprabha, meaning here is the predominance of jewels. The second level is named Shark Araprabha, which means land of excess gravel. The third level is known as Valuka Prabha, meaning land of excess sand. The fourth level is Pana Prabha, meaning land containing predominance of mud. The fifth level's name is Duma Prabha, meaning predominance of smoke. The sixth level is called Tama Prabha, meaning predominance of darkness, and the last level is Tamasdama Prabha, meaning land of high concentration of dense darkness. These hells have permanent inhabitants called Naraki. They have a fixed lifespan and can transform into various forms. The level of hell is given on the basis of the severity of a person's bad deeds in this world. The sinners cross the horrible Vedarani River, by boat, being urged on by arrows and wounded with spears. They are pierced with long spikes and tridents. Some sinners, around whose necks big stones are tied, are drowned in deep water. Some are put in burning chaff and roasted in it. The sinners are led to the great impassable hell, full of agony, called Asuria, where the sun does not shine and there is great darkness. They are put in a cave, where fire comes from above, below, and all sides. The sinners roasted on the fire like fish put on the fire alive. Thereafter, sinners are brought to a dreadful place called Santakshana, where their hands and feet are tied and cut off like planks of wood. Then writhing victims are cooked like living fish in an iron cauldron filled with their own blood, their limbs covered with ordure, and their heads smashed. These sinners cannot die due to the torture. If they die, they are immediately reborn and are then repeatedly killed with tortures and punishments. Sometimes the skulls of the sinners are drilled, their noses, ears, and lips are cut off, and every sort of physical punishment is inflicted on them. Their punishment will continue until sinners get appropriate retribution for their evil deeds in this mundane world. Xibalba, Hell of Maya Religion. The Popol Vuh, or the Book of the Community, is a religious narrative of the Maya religion. It was originally in the oral traditions, which were transcribed in 1550 by Spanish scholars. It says that below the earth lurk 9 layers of underworlds. Each cosmic level was populated by colorful figures from their polytheistic pantheon of at least 166 named gods. It is in this underground world that the spirits of every deceased person go to dwell after life on earth. It is called Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, which has the literal meaning place of fright. It is the hell of the Maya religion. The most feared in Xibalba are the lords of the underworld, comprised of 12 death gods. They sit in a court-like setting. These gods have cadaver-like appearances and are the complete opposite of life. They are in charge of the underworld and tasked with maintaining the balance between the worlds of the living and the dead. Xibalba's ultimate ruler is Apuk, or Kitsin, the foul-smelling, god of death and king of the underworld. He reigns over Xibalba with his wife, the goddess Ixtab, the deity of suicide. The death gods are known to pop up in the world of the living to spread disease and despair. The 2 leading figures are 1 death and 7 death, although in the oral tradition of the Lakandan people, there is only one chief death god, the skeletal Kitsin. Roamed by demonic predators, Xibalba is a vast land from which there is no escape. The Popol Vuh reveals it to be a giant city of deception and trickery. Just traveling to its outskirts involved overcoming a series of booby traps. The first one has to cross a river of scorpions, then a thick river of blood, then an oozing river of pus. Further on, the traveler must navigate a crossroads of 4 roads, which each speak aloud to lead one astray. Finally, the visitor reaches the council place of Xibalba, where protocol dictates he or she must greet the seated lords. This, however, is a confusing and humiliating process, because the seats around the lords have been filled with lifelike dummies, making it difficult to know who to approach. The deceased is then offered a bench to rest and recover from the embarrassment, but this seat turns out to be a scalding hot cooking plate. When the lords of Xibalba have had enough fun with these humiliations, the deceased is sent for further trials in at least 6 houses of endurance tests. The dark house is without any light, the rattling house, or cold house, is kept at sub-zero temperatures with hail ricocheting off its walls, and a third is filled with fires and unbearable heat. The jaguar house is crawling with ravenous jungle cats, another contains swooping, screaming bats, and finally, there is the house of razor blades, in which knives fly around of their own will. There is apparently no Mayan spiritual justice system for weighing up merits and virtues. Everyone is expected to undergo this litany of trials, which is why we find the Maya dead buried with post-mortem survival kits of weapons, tools, precious stones, cocoa for sustenance, and pet dogs, both real and made of pottery, for companionship. The sacred book does make it clear that, despite the evil nature of the gods of Xibalba, this is not a place for punishment. The Mayans do not believe in punishment or reward in the afterlife. Xibalba is simply the next world where human souls reside after they leave life on earth and come here after death. The House of Hades, Hell in ancient Greek religion. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Hades was the god of the dead and the king of the underworld. The hell in ancient Greek religion was called the House of Hades. Hades was the eldest son of Cronus and Rhea Titans. There was a prophecy that Cronus would be dethroned by his children, so he devoured all his children except Zeus when they were born. Zeus tricked his father and pushed Cronus to regurgitate his siblings. Hades and his brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, defeated their father's generation of gods called the Titans and claimed joint rulership over the cosmos. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the sky, and Poseidon the sea, with the earth available to all three concurrently. In artistic depictions, Hades is typically portrayed holding a bident, wearing his helmet, with Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld, standing at his side. The helmet gave him the power of invisibility. The meaning of Hades was the unseen one. In Greek mythology, Hades was always portrayed as passive but never shown negatively. His role was often to maintain relative balance. He was also depicted as cold and stern, and he held all of his subjects equally accountable to his laws. He cared little about what happened in the world above, as his primary attention was ensuring none of his subjects ever left his domain. The realm of Hades was the misty and gloomy abode of the dead, where all mortals went after their physical death. There were several sections of the realm of Hades, including Elysium, the Asphodel Meadows, Legendis Campi, or the Fields of Mourning, and Tartarus. The terrible river Styx encircled the underworld 7 times and was known as the River of Hatred and Unbreakable Oaths. The deceased entered the underworld by crossing the Styx River, ferried across by Charon, who charged an obelisk, a small coin for passage placed in the mouth of the deceased by pious relatives. Paupers and the friendless gathered for 100 years on the shore of the Styx River due to the non-availability of the required coins. The Greeks offered milk, honey, and other liquids to the deities to prevent the deceased from returning to the upper world and to haunt those who had not given them a proper burial. The Styx formed the boundary between the upper and lower worlds, and it was so revered that even gods swore by taking its name. Having crossed the Styx, souls encountered a wild array of beasts patrolling the area before the main doors, including centaurs, Scylla, Briareus, the Gorgons, the Lernaean Hydra, Geryon, the Chimera, and Harpies. And then there was the most notorious of all, called Cerberus, the ferocious, three-headed hellhound dog-like creature guarding the entrance of Greek hell. After passing Cerberus, the deceased entered the land of the dead to be judged for their deeds. They reached the house of Hades, which was a joyless labyrinth of dark, cold halls, surrounded by locked gates. In front of the house sat 3 judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. They judged the souls and sent them to the fields of Asphodel if they were neither virtuous nor evil but also not remarkable enough for admittance to the Elysian fields. The souls here wandered despondently with other spirits. Some souls were sent to the Legendis Campi or fields of mourning. These souls belonged to those who had wasted away their lives on unrequited love. The souls with good deeds and blameless characters were sent to Elysium, also called the Islands of the Blessed. It was the paradise destination for only the most virtuous. The souls of sinners and evil people were consigned to Tartarus. Tartarus was the deep abyss that was used as a dungeon of torment and suffering for the wicked, where the souls of the sinners were judged after death and where the wicked received divine punishment. Originally, Tartarus was used only to confine dangers to the gods of Olympus and their predecessors. In later mythologies, Tartarus became a space dedicated to the imprisonment and torment of mortals who had sinned against the gods, and each punishment was unique to the condemned. For example, when his pregnant daughter Coronis was killed by either Artemis or Apollo, King Phlegyas set fire to the Apollonian temple at Delphi. He was killed by Apollo and punished in Tartarus by being entombed in a rock and starving in front of an eternal feast as he shouted to the other inhabitants not to despise the gods. There were 5 rivers in Greek hell. The first was called Acheron. It was a dark and depthless river of sorrow and pain. The second river's name was Cocytus, meaning wailing laments. The third river was Phlegethon, or fire. The fourth was Lethe, or oblivion. If someone sipped or drank its water, it wiped away the memory of his past life. The dead were forced to drink to forget their previous lives in the hope of reincarnation. The fifth was the Styx River. Yomi, hell in Shintoism. The people of Japan profess Shintoism. It also has a hell called Yomi, or Yomi no Kuni. It is a different hell as compared to other hells, as all souls go there irrespective of their actions in this world. There is no reward or punishment system in Yomi. It is not scary. There's no fire or torture there. Yomi is not very well defined beyond being a shadowy land of the dead, but it is thought to be under the ground as it is the third in a triad of realms described in the Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, and source for many Shinto beliefs across the centuries. Yomi is said to be a very dirty and polluted place. In Japanese tradition, pollution is usually associated with evil. Yomi is ruled over by Izanami no Mikoto, the grand deity of Yomi. Sheol and Gehinnom, hell in Judaism. The Bible most often suggests that physical death is the end of life. This is the case with such central figures as Abraham, Moses, and Miriam. There are, however, several biblical references to a place called Sheol. It is described as a dark and deep place, the pit, and the land of forgetfulness, where human beings descend after death. The suggestion is that in Sheol, the deceased, although cut off from God and humankind, live on in some shadowy state of existence. While this vision of Sheol is rather bleak, there is generally no concept of judgment, reward, or punishment attached to it. Many books of the Bible mention that every dead person goes down to Sheol, whether good or evil, rich or poor, slave or free man. When considered a place, geographically, Sheol is somewhere in the depths of the earth and marks the point at the greatest possible distance from heaven. It is a land, and a place with gates, and farthest corners. The dead lead a pale non-life existence there, without knowledge or feeling, and it is a silent realm of oblivion to those who enter. After the catastrophe of 70 AD, when the Second Temple of the Jews was destroyed by the Romans, their theologians put forth a new religious philosophy different from the Hebrew Bible. They compared this world to an antechamber that leads to Olam Haba, the world to come. It is often used interchangeably with the term Gan Eden or the Garden of Eden, referring to a heavenly realm where souls reside after physical death. Only truly righteous souls can ascend directly to the Garden of Eden. The sinners and other persons will be sent to a place of punishment, generally referred to as Gehinnom. Gehenna, or Gehinnom, on the other hand, is believed to be based on a real terrestrial location, a hell one can still visit, a small valley to the south of Jerusalem known as the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. Here, it was said that, at a specific location called Topheth, the ancient Canaanites made sacrifices to the gods Moloch and Baal by burning their own children alive, while beating drums to hide the screams. Later, it was used to burn rubbish, and the cadavers of animals and criminals were thrown into it. Its fire used to burn perpetually. This led to the area being viewed as a cursed place, and it quickly became a figurative equivalent for hell, and in English translations, the word Gehenna or Gehinnom was replaced with the word hell. Some view Gehinnom as the biblical hell, a place of torture and punishment, fire, and brimstone. Others imagine it less harshly, as a place where one reviews the actions of his or her life and repents past misdeeds. The soul's sentence in Gehinnom is usually limited to 12 months of purgation before it takes its place in the Garden of Eden. The utterly wicked will not ascend to the Garden of Eden at the end of this period, and they will be utterly destroyed and cease to exist. Some theologians believe that sinners are placed there for eternal damnation. The Bible does not give any graphic details of Judaism's hell. Hell in Christianity. Jesus Christ and the early Christians did not believe in the existence of hell. They were of the view that at the end of time, when the events of human history would be played out, God would bring back to life both the righteous and the sinful in their physical bodies. The righteous would live forever in peaceful bliss in the perfect utopian kingdom that God would establish on earth, while the wicked would be shown their crimes and then be obliterated from all planes of existence forever. This is almost certainly the view of the historical Jesus and his earliest followers, who did not appear to believe that, on dying, a person's soul goes to heaven or hell. This coming kingdom of God on earth was at the heart of Jesus' teachings. Following Jesus' death, his disciples continued proclaiming his message, even as they transformed it, for the end Jesus had predicted had not come. Thus, his message was re-evaluated, and it was advocated that, instead of a grand ushering into eternity at the end of time, fate awaited each person shortly after their physical death. The idea of punishment and reward was introduced, superseding the message of Jesus Christ regarding the kingdom of God on earth and the eventual annihilation of the wicked. Gradually, over centuries, the concept of the realm of hell strengthened in popular thought. The word hell does not appear in the Greek New Testament. Instead, one of three words is used, the Greek words Tartarus or Hades, or the Hebrew word Gehinnom. Christianity derived its concept of hell from the Book of Revelation, which is also the last book of the New Testament. Its author is unknown, however, some scholars identify him as John of Patmos. In verses 1-3, chapter 20 of the Book of Revelation, he mentions the pit of hell. He wrote, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he will be released for a short time." This is followed shortly by verse 10, which describes the lake of fire and brimstone where the devil, the beast, and the false prophet would be sent and tormented day and night forever. This book also describes many people whose names would not be found written in the book of life. They would also be thrown into the lake of fire, along with death and Hades themselves, who will also be thrown into the burning lake. Like Jesus, the author of Revelation believes the wicked will be exterminated, never to live again. It is very perplexing, as on one hand he says sinners will simply cease to live, and on the other hand he mentions a lake of fire and brimstone where some selected would be sent. The Christian Church says that sinners will go to eternal damnation in eternal fire. Their teaching is based on Jesus' parable of the sheep and the goats in verses 41, chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew. "Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels." And again, "And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal." The Gospel of Matthew 25 verse 46. The Christians hold belief in a separate hell by reading just a very few verses in the books of the New Testament which mention Christian hell indirectly. Where this hell is situated, who maintains it, and what else is in there besides fire, no one knows. Jahannam. Hell in Islam. In Islam, Jahannam, or hell, is the place of punishment for unbelievers and evildoers in the afterlife. This belief is an integral part of Islamic theology and occupies an important place in the religion of Islam. Punishment and suffering in hell, in mainstream Islam, are physical, psychological, and spiritual, and vary according to the sins of the condemned person. Hell itself will last for eternity. For Muslims, confinement to hell is temporary, but not for others. The common belief among Muslims holds that Jahannam has existed since time immemorial. Hell is described physically. It is enormous and located below paradise. It has 7 levels, each one more severe than the one above it. It is said to have mountains, rivers, valleys, and even oceans filled with disgusting fluids. The description of Jahannam as a place of blazing fire appears in almost every verse in the Quran describing hell. The Quran mentions clearly about the torture of the fire, flames that crackle and roar, fierce, boiling waters, scorching wind, and black smoke, roaring and boiling as if it would burst with rage. Hell is described as being located below paradise, and it has 7 levels with separate gates. Every gate has a specific name. The gate to the lowest region of hell, Hawiyah, or abyss, is reserved for hypocrites and those who take a flexible approach to truth. The next gate, Jahim, or hellfire, welcomes polytheists. Sakar Gate, or Blaze, is for the Sabians, a religious group mentioned 3 times in the Quran. For the Zoroastrians and satanic worshippers stands the 4th gate, Layza, meaning flame, and for the Jews, the fifth hell gate called Hutama is reserved. The sixth gate is for Christians, and its name is Qxir, or fire. The seventh gate, Jahannam, is a place for Muslims who have committed grave sins. According to Islam, the dwellers of hell are disbelievers in the Prophet, Islam, and God. These include people who lived during Muhammad's time but did not accept Islam, the polytheists, enemies of Muhammad who worshipped idols, the losers, or enemies of Muhammad who died in war against him, as well as broad categories of sinners, the apostates, hypocrites, polytheists, and those who do not believe in Islam or its teaching. In Islamic hell, the inhabitants of Jahannam scream and wail all the time. Their scorched skins are constantly replaced with new ones so that they can taste the torment anew and permanently. They drink festering water and, though death appears on all sides, they cannot die. They are linked together in chains of 70 cubits, wearing clothing of fire. The boiling water is poured over their heads, melting their insides as well as their skins. The sinners are chained and are guarded by merciless angels. Its inmates will be thirsty and hungry constantly. For them, only boiling water, melted brass, or bitterly cold, unclean, full of pus, liquid is available. According to the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad called hadiths, hell has 70,000 valleys, each with 70,000 ravines, inhabited by 70,000 serpents and scorpions. It is huge in size and more populous than paradise. Out of every 1,000 people entering the afterlife, 999 of them will end up in the fire of hell. The other punishments in hell are cutting off lips with scissors, perpetual flogging, drowning, stoning, and falling from heights, etc. One interesting natural feature of Jahannam is a giant hell tree named Zakum in the Quran, which grows from the bottom of hell and bears fruit in the form of devil heads. It is food for the sinful. This fruit has murky oil in it. It boils within bellies, like the boiling of scalding water. Prophet Muhammad is claimed to be the eyewitness to the tortures in hell. One night, he was taken to heaven and shown hell. He saw the sufferings of sinners. Men who stole the wealth of orphans now bore the monstrous lips of camels, fire stuffed into their mouths, flames bursting from their posteriors. Women who had given birth to bastards were hung by their breasts, and adulterous men who had chased after forbidden women were dining on stinking rotten meat, despite there being fresh meat before them. According to Islam, these punishments are eternal for sinners, and no change or reprieve will come from these punishments.